right, Shalom, Shalom, Brakata Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rakakwadash. Double honors to our apostles and elder bishops here at Great Millstone. Shalom to you brothers that's pushing the work in truth with all sincerity. Name of this lesson is Always Remember Who You Are. All right, always remember who you are. Well, more importantly, always remember your purpose. Okay, and sometimes we get down in the spirit, and your self-esteem can rise and fall based on your own opinion about yourself, you know, and it's important to understand that, you were called into a magnificent work, all right? And I remember being in the world trying to plan my future, and I had everything planned out, from what school I was going to go to what career field I was going to go into. But let me tell you, you know, I couldn't have planned a more perfect thing, all right, than this truth. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. The Lord planned this thing perfectly for us, you know, and it's important to remember, why you here, and always keep in mind that this is a high calling, you know. Um, there's nothing better going in the world right now than this truth, all right, because this is putting us um, or setting us up for salvation, which is the most coveted thing that anyone can covet. All right. Well, I say it like this. I mean, because most people ain't coveting after salvation. They're not searching for it. They're trying to save themselves in other ways. But for the elect, all right, for the most important people on the planet, which are the elect, all right, this is the most coveted thing for us. Okay. So let's see here. I want to start here in 2nd Ezra 9:21. Because hey, the world, whether it be Israel, whether it be the heathen in the world, right? They look at us a certain way. They look at us as nothing, as as the scripture said, off scoring, despised. You know, some even call us bums, but we're way more than that. You know, and it's important to understand that. You're God's workmanship. Okay, you're the Lord's workmanship. Okay, and the Lord has done a great deal. And we're going to read that right now. So, 2nd Ezra 9:21, it says, "And I saw it and spared it greatly, and have kept me a grape of the cluster," right? Just one grape of a cluster, right? "And a plant of a great people." Okay. Verse 22, it says, "Let the multitude perish then, which was born in vain." So if the Lord keeping just a grape of the cluster, basically a remnant, okay, the rest of that cluster was born in vain, is for nothing, okay, and that's what it's dealing with. It's dealing with the Lord had kept him, the best part, all right, which are the elect, okay. So let the multitude perish then, which was born in vain. So most of our people, they were simply born in vain. Most of them were born to be judged. You know, most of them was born to just, be made an example. I was listening to the elders earlier. Okay, and yeah, man, Jake was just raised up to be, you know, discarded. Okay, to be made an example of. All right, and then you got the elect. right here, and it says, and let my grape be kept, and my plant, for with great labor have I made it perfect. See, so with great labor has he made it perfect. All right, and that's what through ultimately through what? The refining. Okay, the Lord refining his men through what? The furnace of adversity. Okay, and us going through afflictions for the namesake, for Yahweh namesake, is really, the best thing going. Suffering for righteousness' sake, you know, and a lot of people can't do that, but we were chosen to go through that because what? Here, let's get this one. Ecclesiasticus. It says, here we go. It says, Ecclesiasticus 2 and 5. It says, for gold is tried in the fire, and acceptable men in the furnace of adversity. Right. So acceptable men. Okay. Acceptable men. All right. So you're an exception. All right. You're the exception. Okay. So let's look that word exceptional. All right. Or acceptable. Here it says pleasing, gratifying, agreeable, pleasant. So that's what we are in the eyes of the Lord. Pleasing, gratifying, agreeable, pleasant. Okay. We're worthy of acceptance. Okay. Worthy. Okay. So part of us being in this truth, that's why I say never forget who you are. Always remember who you are. Always remember your purpose. Okay, you're not just going through life and that's just what it is, and you're just going through the motions. No, this is way greater than that, man. And what the Lord is actually doing for us and how he has this thing set up for us. Okay. They're gonna be talking about this for ages in the future world to come. Okay. They're gonna be talking about our story and the things that we've done and our flight of or our light affliction. Okay. All right. And the fact that we suffered with Yahweh Shai. Okay. The fact that you suffered, with the man. All right. And if we endure, we receive a crown of glory. And really, man, you can't really that's something to really behold. That's something to really be, to think about. Here, this is Isaiah 48 and 9. It says, yet for mine own sake and for the honor of my name, excuse me. Let me read the KJV, and then I might go back to NLT. Isaiah 48 9, it says, for my name's sake will I defer mine anger, and for my praise will I refrain for thee, that I cut thee not off. All right. Because, yeah, we deserve to be cut off. Right. But we're acceptable in the Lord's eyes. Right. We're pleasing in the Lord's eyes. Okay. So, right. So he's not doing it, he's doing it for his name's sake. Okay. Which is a very humbling thing. It's not because we wanted it. And in fact, we do wanted it. We want it, but the Lord is showing you that he wants it more than anything. Okay. And he's doing it for his name's sake. Isaiah 48 and 10, it says, behold, I have refined thee, but not with silver. I have chosen thee in a furnace of affliction. Okay. Going back to what it says in 2nd Ezra, the 9th chapter. Okay. And the 22nd verse. For with great labor have I made it perfect. Right. And how's he making us perfect? Through this refining process, okay, through this purging process, and the Lord said he will thoroughly purge his floor. Okay. So behold, I have refined thee, but not with silver. I have chosen thee in the furnace of affliction. And don't let nobody tell you that, and this truth is supposed to be an easy ride. That's not the case. You were put here to suffer, to bring yourself into the Lord's glory. Okay, if that makes sense, all right. You were put here to suffer so you can enter into his glory. All right, so because the Lord suffered to enter into his glory. Okay, all right. So for mine own sake, even for mine own sake, will I do it. For how should my name be polluted? And I will not give my glory unto another. See, right? Because what did the scripture say? I have yet chosen Israel. All right, and that kills supersessionism. That kills replacement theology. All right, and what we see them guys doing is, essentially making the Lord a liar. And the Lord hates that, and they're changing the words of the Heavenly Father. Good luck with that. We know what the scriptures say, that Revelations 22 and 18, that their name's going to be taken out of the book of life. All right. So Isaiah 14:1, for the Lord Yahweh will have mercy on Jacob and yet choose Israel and set them in their own land. Right. And the strangers shall be joined with them. Right. The strangers are what? The scattered, the sojourners. All right. Those who are estranged from their God and from their inheritance, right? It says, shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. Why? Because the prophecy goes that he's going to gather all the scattered Israelites from the four corners of the earth and bring them back into their own land, okay? And he said he was going to do it. He didn't say a mandate, all right, from some heathen, state, okay? All right, so let's see here. All right, and look, it was so great. I gotta get this one because I'm gonna come back to this because we are entering into another glory. But this is what Balaam said, okay, to Balak. All right, and Balaam was what a priestess or a high priest, okay, and Balak was a Moabite who hired Balaam to curse Israel. And this is pretty much what happened. Okay, and I kind of want to get straight to the point to show you the statement that Balaam had made. Okay, so I'll start at Numbers 23 and 8. Okay, because in short, Balak hired Balaam to curse Israel, his enemies. All right, and this is what happened. All right. Well, I'll start at 7. It says, and he took up his parable and said, Balak, the king of Moab, hath brought me from Aram out of the mountains of the east, saying, come, curse me, Jacob, and come defy Israel. How shall I curse whom God hath not cursed? All right, or how shall I defy whom the Lord hath not defied? Right? For from the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I behold him. Lo, the people shall dwell alone, and shall not be reckoned among the nations. That's right. All right, we're gonna have our own society. Okay, there ain't gonna be no joint venture, joint rulership. No, we're gonna be the center of civilization. Okay, and we're gonna dwell alone. It's gonna be all ours. All right, and the nations are gonna have to bow to us. Okay, and that's pretty much what Balaam saw, because the Lord stopped him as he was going to make his, I believe he was going to, do his sacrifices, right? And he was going to throw up those curses. But the Lord stopped him, okay? And he let him in on the mystery, okay? What was going to take place in the end time. So verse 20. All right. So Salakia, I had to stop the recording for a second, but let's see here. Numbers 23 and 10. It says, who can count the dust of Jacob and the number of the fourth part of Israel? Right? Yeah, because we are great in number as the sand of the sea, as we read in Second Ezra 9:22. All right. But the Lord is about to us. He's about to essentially restart with the elect. Okay. So he's going to restart us, man. We're going to have a fresh start with the elect. Okay. He said, let me die the death of the righteous. This is what he said. This is what he said. Okay. And let my last end be like his. Right. Because, I mean, they got us slated for death. I mean, and the Lord really, he made it that way, that we became martyrs, for the truth's sake. Okay. Because through that's the justification of, life eternal. How else are we going to get it? Um, it's a very daunting, thing to think about, having your life taken away. Um, you know, and I think about what Dr. Umar said, man, why do I gotta die to get to the kingdom of heaven? Yeah, but that's how normal, that's what the normal, Jake thinks like. Okay. Jake ain't thinking about their past lives and the evil that they've done, you know, and what it's going to take to become acceptable men in the furnace of adversity. Okay. And the Lord is with us, because he tailor made what we have to go through in order to reach that salvation, in order to be accepted by him, in order for us to be pleasing, you know, which this is going to bring us into a whole another glory that we're coming into. All right. So it may seem dim if you're looking at it from a carnal perspective, but when you look at the trespasses and the evil that we have done, it's pretty much the only thing we have left is to go through what Yahushua went through, is to suffer for righteousness' sake, so that, you know, he deem us worthy. Okay. And so we're going to enter into a whole new glory, right? The elders they speak on this, the scriptures. Okay. And that other glory is going to be when, uh, the famine of the word comes, when we're pretty much going to see, the spirit of the Lord pick up, you know, um, things are going to get very weary out here. Things are going to get very sorrows. The scripture says on all sides. So the spirit of the Lord is going to have to, pick up, because things are going to get very dim. Things are going to be very, dark. All right. 2 Corinthians 3:18, it says, but we all right. Let me see. Let's see here. But we all, with open face, beholding as in a glass the glory of the Lord, are changed into the same image from glory to glory. So this thing, what we're doing is going out on the highways and byways, prophesying, with the spirit of his mouth, casting down the devil. That's glory. That's a glory. That's a glorious thing. Standing up for righteousness' sake. Speaking justice, condemning the wicked. That's a glory, right? But there's another glory to come. Okay, and that glory is the Lord, his spirit, heightening and bringing us to another level. Okay, because we only gonna get through that level by way of purging, by way of refinement. You know, and it's really a beautiful setup when you look at it. Okay, it ain't as bad as we think. I mean, it's bad, but I do get annoyed every time because you always hear negative, negative, negative. But um, there is essentially, good that's coming from it. Okay, and and I think that's the test too as well. You know, you may have Jake, see it as all bad, see it as all negative, but if you're not actually understanding what the will of the Lord is, and how we're gonna go from glory to glory, then you're gonna be lost. You could despise this next turn of events, and really you're supposed to give glory to the Lord, you know. And we don't want to despise this next glory that the Lord has set up, because He set all of this up. Remember, He says, "For with great labor have I made it perfect." What made his what that grape, okay, which was the grape that He kept of the cluster. All right. In other words, the elect that He kept from, or that He took from, or the remnant that He took from the multitudes of Israelites. Okay, which is as the sand of the sea. All right. So let's see here.